All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for Tuesday, September 29th. We always read out our mandate and our statement of purpose of values for the beginning of the meeting. So our mandate, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is charged with matters concerning the public accounts of the province, the annual report of the Auditor General, and fiscal management. Statement of purpose and values. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts is dedicated to improving public administration in partnership with the Auditor General. The committee examines the administration of government policy, not the merits of it. The committee strives to achieve consensus in its decisions whenever possible. Members take a nonpartisan approach to the work of the committee. So I'll ask for an adoption of the agenda. Sydney? And so I'd like to welcome everybody here today. We have Corey Deagle, Vice Chair, Sydney McEwen, Heath McDonald, and Carla Bernard. And joining us also is Hannah Bell and Ola Hammerland. So thank you, committee, for joining. And today we're going to be hearing from Island Investment Development Corporation. So we have four guests with us here today. We have Jamie Aiken, who's the Executive Director, Johnny Flynn, who's the IIDI Board Chair. We have Aaron McGrath-Goody, Deputy Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture, as well as Jeff Young, who is the Business Integration Manager. And I believe we have a presentation, and so I will turn it over to you, and I'll let you go through the presentation, and then we'll hold your questions until the end. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for the invitation here today. Staff here have pulled together a short presentation that we'll go through here. As alluded to, if you want to ask questions through, that I don't mind, or if you want to hold them towards the end, that would be great as well. All right, thank you, Jeff. So hopefully this presentation will provide a quick overview of what Island Investment Development Inc., or IIDI, is, including the structure and some financial information. We'll also provide an update on our provincial objectives through immigration, housing, and economic development.
I'm sorry, I can't, sorry to interrupt.
Do you want a copy? We have a copy here.
Do you have a copy?
Yeah. Yes.
That would be great, thank you.
Just in case it failed on the computer, we always like to back up plans.
Thank you very much.
So who we are, as alluded to, we're a Crown Corporation within the Department of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture, established under the Act of IIDI. It operates as the Office of Immigration. It's responsible for the provincial immigration strategy and is the signatory to the Canadian Prince Edward Island Immigration Agreement, which was signed approximately back in 2002. IIDI also administers the Pei Sentry Fund, so that's a loan portfolio in cooperation with Finance PEI, which I'll explain here shortly. And the whole purpose of IIDI is to support economic growth and the needs of the private sector in trying to stimulate economic development here in PEI. So our structure. Again, we're a Crown Corporation, reporting into the Minister of Economic Growth and Tourism and Culture. IIDI's mandate is under the Development Act. Changes to any immigration programs or policies, we bring those to our board, the IIDI board. Loan applications are considered as well by the IIDI board. Loans greater than $1 million are also presented to Treasury Board for approval, and any loans greater than 2.5 are also recommended to Treasury Board and Executive Council. So we'll go through 3 boards for a loan that's in excess of $2.5 million. All loan applications are reviewed by professional loans officers within the Crown, completing due diligence, sensitivity analysis, and financial review. Additionally, loans are secured by tangible assets, including buildings, equipment, and personal guarantees. The terms for these loans are typically 5 years with a locked-in interest rate of 4%. Additionally, all loans greater than $100,000 are publicly disclosed on our website, and I provided the link there for your reference. On a quarterly basis, the entire loan portfolio is reviewed with the board members of IIDI, allowing the opportunity for questions and discussions regarding to specific loans and getting updates on various matters with those loan clients. Our annual financial statements of IIDI are audited by an external professional accounting firm and approved by the board. The external accounting firm comes in and presents these financial statements to the board members, and and allows an opportunity for them to ask further questions and clarification on those statements. The financial statements are also provided to the Provincial Controller's Office. IIDI provides answers and questions to the Auditor General on any specific loans or financial affairs of IIDI. Our annual report for March 31st, 2020 was presented to the IIDI board last week and will be made available on our website here hopefully by end of day tomorrow. It's just in for translation right now into French. So that's what's holding that up. The Auditor General, as noted in her 2019 report, included an update on both Finance PEI and IIDI, which we have implemented all the recommendations as recommended by the Auditor General. So in 2013, the Provincial Nominee Program had 3 recommendations, and in 2016, under the Developmental Lending programs, there was 10 recommendations, which were all implemented, and she has come back and reviewed our implementation to ensure that they were there. So I just provided the source there within her 2019 AG report, page 84. The IDI's current board of directors, Johnny Flynn, is you have met here this morning, Brendan McCluskey, Letty LaRosa, Pam Montgomery, Aaron McGrath, myself, and Dan Campbell, the Deputy Minister of Finance. This board was established in August 2018 and has been very active since. Within IIDI, as I alluded to earlier, there's essentially 2 different pillars. The first is our immigration programs. Approximately 1,200 nominations occur annually, with over 90% of those nominations within our labor programs, where they're filling labor shortages with companies that cannot fill them with local skill sets. The other pillar within IIDI is our Pei Sentry Fund, which typically consists of approximately 90 clients with a loan portfolio of $180 million. The loan portfolio is separate from Finance PEI, which has an additional approximately $220 million in loans. So collectively, there's 2 portfolios that we combine into one. And again, our annual reports for IIDI will be available here shortly. The Provincial Nominee Program overview. Primary goal is to support immigration to smaller jurisdictions. We're trying to encourage immigration right across PEI. We're seeing a lot of growth in rural PEI and a lot of needs for labor. And we've been working closely with the communities and employers to try and encourage that. Any program changes, though, that we make to our programs, we have to do in concert with the federal government. We have to advise them of what our program intentions are and give them a rationale to why we're wanting to make those changes. All provinces have a provincial nominee program. PEI is not unique. Every province has a PNP program. And the program has evolved over the years. Today, the Provincial Nominee Program is more focused on labor recruitment than ever before, with over 90% of our nominations going through our labor programs. The provincial role is to help recruit and select candidates who meet the provincial criteria, including the intent to reside and economically establish here in PEI. However, we work very closely with the island business community. It is them that identify the foreign skill, talent that they want to hire. So when they find that foreign national that they want to hire, they would then approach us to work with us to find pathways for permanent residency. The vast majority, over 95 to 96% of our labor applicants are already here working on PEI before they come through one of our immigration programs. Typically, they come through one of the temporary foreign worker programs, so they have a pre-established time of how long they can stay in Canada. Typically, they would get a 2-year work permit, and then they work to try and find a pathway to permanent residency where they would apply to one of the provincial nominee programs across the country. So by making the requirement that we want to see the foreign nationals working with the island companies, we've seen stronger retention rates, and we're starting to see some very good diversity right across the island. So the Provincial Nominee Program, as I alluded to, allows the province to nominate a foreign national to the federal government for permanent residency. The federal government still holds all the responsibility for verifying admissibility, criminality, and health. The province is essentially responsible for assessing economic ability to establish here in PEI. And that's where we go back to that they have a job here in PEI and they're working with an employer. So as most members here would appreciate, the provincial nominee has evolved over the years. So March in 2001 was when the provincial nominee was established here in PEI, and we started off with 200 nominees or 200 nominations. In 2005 to 2008, we had the Immigrant Partner Program, the Immigrant Entrepreneur, the Immigrant Connectors, and Skilled Worker. And those programs were predominantly weighted towards the economic entrepreneur side of the program, where probably 70 to 75% were within the business side. Today, it's less than 10. So you can see that we have transitioned to more of a labor focus. In March 2011, the P&P was reviewed, and there was several new streams introduced under the labor impact category, as well as under the business impact category. Under the business impact category, we had the 100% ownership stream, where essentially an individual would provide an escrow deposit of $200,000 that they would start their business. And we'll talk more about that shortly. In 2015, IRCC, Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, the federal government, introduced an expression of interest system, which had 3 streams of immigration directed through the federal government. Applicants would submit an expression of interest to the program with the hopes of being selected. So simply just by submitting your expression of interest does not necessarily lead to an application. It's ranking the candidates in there so we can select the best candidates possible. It's not the first in, first out. So the provinces and the federal government can rank various skills and attributes that we're looking for. Typically, education is a big criteria, as well as language. In 2018, the province of PEI also launched its own expression of interest model. So we followed the best practices of other jurisdictions, as well as the federal government, and got away from the first in, first out, to then be able to process applications based on merit. In 2018, the province of PEI, through the Office of Immigration, closed their escrow program and introduced a work permit stream. So again, the Provincial Nominee Program in 2019 and 20, over 90% of our nominations were within the labor. I will speak shortly here what a nomination is compared to a landing. Also, the federal government had various new initiatives for temporary foreign workers in the NOC-C industry. Typically, those are your blue-collar workers that are working in manufacturing or within the oil fields out west and things of that nature. Additionally, we launched a new truck drivers program. This is a significant issue that we're seeing with the trucking industry right across Canada. And the federal government worked with the provinces to try and help us develop programs to retain and attract truck drivers to our regions. Work permit entrepreneurs, since the inception, there's been 238 applications received. Just because we received an application doesn't mean that'll lead to a nomination or an actual landing. There's still various due diligence and processes that have to be completed. The Atlantic pilot was recently announced several years ago for the Atlantic region between the partnership of the Atlantic provinces as well as the federal government. And what this program essentially did was fast-track applications to process them even more efficiently than they were. Historically, the federal government of Canada takes between 12 and 18 months to review an application for immigration. The Atlantic pilot was reviewing applications within 3 to 6 months. So as you can appreciate, if you're a foreign nationalist, having certainty of having your application reviewed in a timely manner is very attractive. So since the inception of the pilot, we've had 285 employers designated, meaning that they had interest in applying. So every employer has to register with the province as well. We share that information with the federal government. These companies were indicating that they had over 500 collective vacancies. 321 positions have been approved since the inception in 2017. Those have led to 648 landings. So the 321 approvals, that's the family unit. The landings of 648, that's all the composition of the family members. 54% of the applicants going through the pilot are working with companies in rural PEI. The federal provincial evaluation has been prepared by IRCC, so they've collected various data and reviewed information with the collective provinces. And PEI's one-year retention rate was showing at 94%. So we're seeing very positive results with the Atlantic pilot. The federal government is committed to working towards a permanent program, and the negotiations between the Atlantic provinces and the federal government is ongoing. This here table is a little bit busy, and I apologize, but it's to give you a bit.
Excuse me, Jamie, just a quick question. Sit.
Just getting on your list.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had a question. Okay, continue. My fault.
This table here is a little bit busy, and I apologize, but it does show some interesting information. And this is showing the immigration landings right across the country. So you can see Ontario is the leader with 153 individuals that came to the province in 2019. Quebec and BC would be, as well as Alberta, would be running 2, 3, 4. And then as you look at the Atlantic region, and you can see the PEI is doing quite well compared to our Atlantic provinces. Overall, all provinces are very active in immigration and trying to attract and grow our population with both skills that are in demand, but also grow our population and encourage cultural diversity right across the country. So 2019, a year in review. On the left of this presentation here, we give a quick explanation to what a nomination is. And very simply, I try and keep things simple, that is the family unit. That's where the province has identified the whole family unit. So that's your primary worker, the spouse, and the dependent children. Dependent children have to be in school. They can't be mature and post-grads or have graduated. They need to be economically dependent upon the parents still living at home. The landings is after the federal government of Canada reviews the permanent resident application and approves the person. So essentially they are deemed to have landed in Canada. That doesn't mean they actually have landed on an airplane or done the flagpole turn at the border. They could be here in a work permit working. They get approval for permanent residency, they've deemed to have landed. So they actually have not left the province. They're here and they continue to be here, but now they're deemed to have landed. That has caused some confusion, especially with COVID-19 and travel restrictions. As we're nominating individuals and they're being approved for landing, they have been here for the vast part of the time. As we're going to talk about later too, labor applicants typically require 6 months of work history on PEI before we will accept their application, because we want to ensure retention and integration into the community. So individuals that we're nominating or inviting to apply were actually here prior to March. So they had to get those 6 months before they could get into our portal. So then we would forward those ones onto the federal government, and when they're processed, they would land. So I know I've talked with some media individuals, and they were asking about how individuals are landing during COVID. A lot of these people, over 95%, are already here working in our community. And I think it's important that we continue to encourage our temporary foreign workers to transition into permanent residence, because we want them to be part of our culture here in PEI. So this slide here kind of walks through the process. I won't go in great details, but this is the process that a skilled worker would apply for immigration. So we have color-coded the different boxes, for yellow being the applicant, orange as being the employer, green's the Office of Immigration, and red is the federal government of Canada. So the employer has to identify that they can't hire anyone locally. We want to make sure that companies here are hiring locally first, but there is skills that are in shortage, and they will have to turn to foreign skilled labor. Once they identify that person, they meet with us, and we work with pathways that would best suit their application for permanent residency. And then the applicant would apply for potentially a work permit or make an application for expression of interest. The employer may have to make application to the federal government of Canada for various different permits required by the federal government for employer compliance certificate. The federal government may issue the work permit to get them over here. The person lands here in PEI, and as noted in that box, that person must work in that job for 6 months before we'll look at taking an application from them. Then they go to the federal government for permanent residency, and hopefully they will be approved for permanent residency thereafter. This process can take upwards to 12 to 18 months. It's not a quick process from start to finish. The next one here is the entrepreneur escrow model. This is the one that was probably the most discussed immigration program over the last number of years. Essentially, these entrepreneurs would make a deposit with the Office of Immigration for $200,000 that they would come and start their business. And after they fulfilled various economic activities, have operated their business for 12 months and incurred $150,000 in operating expenses, we would then look at processing their escrow back, returning their escrow fee. If they did not fulfill those obligations, the funds were defaulted. They were in default of their agreement and the funds were retained by IIDI. So we reviewed that program back in September 2018. The recommendation was to close that operation or that stream down and go solely to a work permit model where there is no escrow. The person has to come over now on a work permit, run the business for a year, demonstrate the economic activities, then they would apply for nomination to the federal government of Canada. So if they don't fulfill their obligations, they will never be nominated for permanent residency through our Provincial Nominee Program. So essentially, we have transitioned away from this program where we do not now have an escrow model. So giving a bit of financial information with regards to this, as noted, the program was closed in 2018. We have transitioned to a work permit. As of March 31st, 2020, IDI held $120 million in restricted funds related to 676 escrow applicants. So these individuals are either with the federal government of Canada for processing, or they're now in process of establishing their business here on PEI. We will be reviewing these applicants over the next number of months, most likely a year to a year and a half. These restricted funds held by IIDI are restricted, and they're placed in with GICs, with investment brokers. As we receive cash, we will go out to 11 or 12 separate financial institutions, being the National Bank, CIBC, Bank of Nova Scotia, Scotia McLeod, TD Wealth, Edward Jones, RBC, the credit unions, Richardson's, and get quotes on GICs. That is the most safe investment that we have felt as a board and as an organization. We do not invest it in stocks and bonds. It's all within GICs. We get those quotes back and we award it to the highest proponent. And it's typically locked in for a 2 to 3 year period, which would match their escrow agreement. So as the individuals would be completing their escrow term, the funds would then also be maturing with the GIC. So within the escrow stream, as I alluded to, there's a performance requirement. There's a $50,000 component related to residency, that they reside here on PEI for 12 months, and then there's $150,000 of it related to the operation of the business. So if the individual does reside here for 12 months, they would receive back their $50,000, and if they fulfill their business commitments within their agreement, they would receive back their $150,000. From the time of nomination to the escrow decision, it can be approximately 3 years from decisions. And we hope we'll have processed the remaining of our applications here over the next 1 to 2 years. The refund rate continues to show improvement. Although the program has ceased operations, we're seeing continued improvement in individuals fulfilling their obligations. If you go to the next slide there, Jeff, we provided a snapshot year over year. So you can see from 2015 to 16, the refund rate was around 40%. And in this most recent fiscal year is around 70%. So we refunded 222 applicants and there was 94 defaults, or 30%. So this year in our financial statements, there was $16.6 million in defaults. And we refunded approximately $42 million to applicants that fulfilled their obligations. This slide here shows the work permit. So again, we are no longer accepting applications under the escrow. This is the program that is being administered today. The individual will apply for an expression of interest. If they meet the skills and attributes, then they are successful being invited to apply. They make an application. We would then support them in obtaining a work permit with the federal government of Canada. They come over on that work permit and they have to run their business and meet the various economic activities. If they fulfill those economic activities within the 12 months, we then nominate them to the federal government of Canada for permanent residency. They must continue to reside and run their business here on PEI during the federal processing. And we're seeing some very good candidates. They're coming through our programs right now through this work permit. And we're we're optimistic that we're seeing some good progress. The next slide gives you a bit of a snapshot of what has come through the work permit stream. So since the inception, there's been 395 invitations issued. 57 of those individuals have withdrawn their application. We're awaiting over 100 applications from applicants. We have received 238. We have declined some files. And then there's 107 files with the federal government of Canada that are awaiting approval for a work permit. So they're going towards that. And we today have 28 applicants that are here, have landed and have met with my staff and are implementing their businesses here on PEI. Businesses range from everything from retail stores to renewable energy, from manufacturing, from one end of the island to the other. The other thing that our office has done is we've worked closely with the communities to try and engage them in integrating the newcomers into those communities. Summerside has been very active, as well as Montague and Three Rivers, Surrey, Tignish, Kensington. The communities have recognized the importance of attracting new individuals to their region for both economic but also diversity and cultural aspects. Switching gears back to the loan portfolio, the Pei Sentry Fund today has approximately $180 million in loans, 92 clients. No restricted cash from the escrow agreements are used in our loan portfolio. This is completely and separate, which you can see in our financial statements. 64% of the loans within Finance, PEI, and IIDI are in rural PEI. The average loan within the portfolio is approximately $300,000. So we try and focus in on small, medium-sized businesses, acting just like any other financial institution, where we take security and personal guarantees, but we want to try and balance the risk and the opportunity for further economic development. Typically, we do what we reference as developmental lending. We're trying to work with individuals that may not be able to get their financing from a chartered bank or another financial institution, and we try and help them grow their business. Sometimes our clients will leave us after 5 or 10 years and go to the charter banks. That's not necessarily a bad thing in my mind. We need to keep the economic wheels moving, so to speak. Okay. So again, in my financial statements, you can see the breakdown of the loan portfolio. 37% is in manufacturing, 31% small business, tourism, a little bit in aerospace, bioscience, and then it pretty much drops off thereafter. The other thing that we have worked within the department is providing financing for residential development complexes. So we're working with developers. We're not building individual or providing financing for individual homes. It's multi-units. We've provided financing for 283 units right across the province, from Tignish to Surrey, Slummon Park, where it was announced we were constructing some within the park, some in Summerside, Montague, and as well as in Stratford. Right now we're on a pause. We're not taking any more applications at this time. We're in discussions with the Development of Social Development and Housing to try and get a handle on how many projects have been financed collectively. We know what we have financed. We try and stay in contact with CMHC as well as others, but the charter banks are also providing financing, which is good. We just want to make sure that we're aligned with everyone else and in trying to stay on top of what's out there today. And then just wrapping up our provincial priorities on immigration. In 2019, we were trying to get out for more information sessions, trying to meet with more of the business community, more of the chambers of commerce, as well as the employers. Providing information. Immigration is sometimes very hard, and we need to continuously get out there and try and get the information out to the company so that they fully understand what their responsibilities are and how the programs can potentially help their companies grow. So yeah, we work with various interest groups. We work with the Association for Newcomers. One thing that we've worked hard over the last number of years is trying to build our relationship within Holland College and UPEI. We're seeing a lot of foreign students that are at these institutions, which is great. They're being educated here We want to try and transition them into the workforce here in PEI so then we can work with them to get permanent residency. If they've been studying here for 2 to 4 years, those are prime candidates that we should be trying to retain. And they're often very well educated. So that's something that we've worked closely with both UPEI and Holland College. It's been somewhat challenging here over the last number of months with COVID to try and get those sessions, but there's other platforms where we're trying to work at getting that information out. And then continues to review our immigration programs. Immigration is constantly moving, constantly changing. There's best practices around the world, also within Canada. The expression of interest model, it came from Australia, and Canada adopted that, and then the provinces have all worked at that approach as well. We're constantly trying to review our programs and trying to find better ways to improve retention and ensure that we're bringing the best candidates here that are here for PEI and will be contributing both economically but also on a cultural aspect. And then we work closely with other departments. We work closely with the Department of Education on providing information on landings. It's a bit of an art as opposed to a science because it's the federal government that's giving the final decision. But we can share information on our nominations and work with them on projections on where and when we think individuals will be approved to come to PEI if they're not already here. They may not necessarily align to the region that they anticipated, but we're seeing immigration right across the province. And as I alluded to before, we also work with the Department of Social Development and Housing to keep them apprised of what our immigration levels are, and also with regards to our lending portfolio with the residential homes. So there's a lot of information sharing occurring. So with that, I'll try and take any questions that I can, and if I don't have the answer, I'm more than happy to take the information back and try and get it to the committee.
All right. Thank you very much for your thorough presentation. I appreciate that, Jamie. And we'll open up questions with Sid, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here, and Jamie for the presentation. I guess I think it was me that made the original request for you to come in, so I appreciate this. And I know it was a while ago, but you know, obviously as a committee we have our priorities, and there's been a lot going on. But I think now is a perfect time to have you in too, as we, you know, as PEI tries to come out of COVID as well. With the immigration program, I've been, you know, involved, I guess, in politics since 2007, since I worked in the opposition office and then became elected and tried to hold government to account, and then now being part of this as well. And you certainly see the progression of things through over time. So one of the reasons I wanted to request in was specifically to see how the changes, the best changes to date in 2018 were happening, or what was coming from them. Hearing about the 90% of applications that are now dealing with labor recruitment was good, and your whole department recognized that, and the former minister and current minister obviously recognized that too. The example I gave way back when was, of course, was the, you know, for example, temporary foreign workers, right? And when they come into a local rural community, they're already being part of that community, right? They're, you know, they're I said at the time, they're coming to church, they're getting involved. You know, if the kids can come, they're getting involved. They're having brunches with everybody. They're around and part of that community. And how do we get those members who are already a part of our communities, rural and urban, to stay here? And you guys are showing exactly if the application process happens after they're already here for a long time. And I mean, just even that clarification about the landings and 95% of people already being here, that's huge. I guess, but my question, if you wouldn't mind going back to the Atlantic pilot slide. Yes. So, you know, by the looks of the numbers and what you presented, Jamie, you know, it looks like great results so far. I guess can you go into, you know, tell me who these folks are? Like, you know, like where are they when you say 285 designated PI employers? Like, who are these? Give me a face to where these people are going, especially when you say 54% rural.
I mean, really, they're across the province. Rural, urban, Charlottetown, Summerside, all points in between, across all sectors, service sectors, trucking sectors, manufacturing, IT, bioscience, fisheries, yeah.
Provide year-round employment. That's the big criteria. It can't be seasonal.
Right.
So if a fish processing facility can offer 12 months of continuous employment, they would be definitely eligible to participate through the pilot. So agriculture, sorry.
Yeah, and actually, the actual designated employers are posted on the website as well. So all designated employers for the Atlantic pilot in all provinces are posted publicly. So that information is available on the website. So, and we can get you that link if you're interested in seeing who's designated.
I'd say it's your key pillars. It's your tourism, it's your agriculture and fisheries are predominantly what our immigration programs are working, but also with regard to export, if you get into your metal fabricators, they're constantly looking for skilled labor that can also weld and fabricate. So those would be the top 5 in my mind.
Great. Sid?
Thank you. No, that's really great to hear. I mean, the big thing is about the so where I'm looking for the faster processing, is the big thing, right? So, for example, construction industries, I'm sure what we'll talk about here, even more so after my questions today, and like it's so. I don't want to say red tape, but it's so intensive, the application process to go through, and when you're balancing so many other things on the side, and then you finally go through the work to nominate somebody and get them here, and then perhaps they don't stay, right? You're through that whole process, you're like, oh, do I want to go through this? But you're desperate for good workers as well. I guess, what are two things? One, like, the negotiations ongoing with the federal government. Can you talk more about that? Like, is it really, like, is it stalled, or is it something that's on the cusp of happening?
It's on the cusp. The issue is going through all the different logistics. When you get 4 provinces all together with the federal government, we're all trying to tinker little things in the program that may be somewhat self-serving. But we're very close. I would envision it'll be signed by the end of this year.
Yeah, and the pilot as it is in effect until December 2021 anyway. So the pilot is ongoing for another year and 3 months or so. So the reason we're negotiating now is just so it can get through the various levels of approvals at both the provincial and federal levels of government. So, yeah.
Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. And now with the COVID lens, will that affect any of your negotiations or any of your direction, so to speak, with the Atlantic pilots?
No, I mean, we have conference calls on a regular basis several times a week with our federal counterparts and other Atlantic counterparts as far as the negotiations go. We do it via conference call, web conference, those sorts of things. So the only change is that we can't get together in a room face-to-face to go through the negotiation process.
Sydney?
Okay. As far as let me speak to the construction industry in particular. Do you have any more numbers? Do you have any breakdown on that industry and how successful they are being with immigration in the labor sector?
Don't have any numbers right now, but we can bring that back certainly. The challenge traditionally with construction, it's changed now because it's become more of a year-round industry. But the challenge previously, kind of in the past, has been that for the immigration programs, the pilot including, as well as our PNP programs, it's required to have year-round full-time employment. So that has changed some because there are a lot of year-round construction projects going on right now. So we can certainly look at those things, but we'll bring the numbers back on construction and what the numbers look like in that industry.
Okay, Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. And to be clear, like, if you're seasonal, you still can go through the application process. It's just you're not able to take advantage of the Atlantic pilots.
Our PNP programs require full-time year-round as well. So for all immigration programs, you have to have a full-time year-round job. So.
It is possible that a construction firm would bring someone in on a temporary work permit, so they could come in for 6 months or 9 months. They just have to leave when the work permit expires. So that allows the company to try and hire that person for that short period. It could also be reoccurring, where they bring that same worker in year over year. It's just there's a period of time where they don't have them working. That person, unfortunately, does not have a pathway for permanent residency right across the country. That's a requirement of the federal government of Canada, that they want to make sure that these people can be economically established. And one thing that they've felt is 12 months of continuous employment is a requirement.
Okay, Sydney?
Thank you. So with the temporary foreign worker program through the federal government, can you explain again how we transition temporary foreign worker from away from a seasonal industry into as a permanent resident into a 12-month job?
So as Jamie said, there's a process the federal government has through the LMIA process where an employer can apply to, bring temporary foreign workers in on work permits. Many seasonal businesses do this, fish processing being one of the big ones, agriculture. In a lot of cases, those processors are running year-round now, so if there are positions that are year-round full-time positions, they would be eligible for a pathway to permanent residency. Unfortunately, there are certain circumstances where if they are just here for a 6-month term and are only working for a limited amount of time, there may or may not be a pathway to permanent residence for that individual. And as Jamie said, that's criteria that's across the country. It's not just provincial PEI criteria. It is a federal and criteria across Canada.
So just to add to that, Jeff, the LMIA is a labor market impact assessment. It's a federal process where the Canadian company must demonstrate to the federal government that they tried to hire locally first. And that's a bit of a cumbersome process, but once they get through that, that's when they can bring in the temporary foreign worker. All the immigration programs are always geared to try and ensure that the company hires locally first, as opposed to looking international.
Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. And just last comment too about the escrow program as well. And it's satisfying to see that it's up to 71%, and I think that's a direct result of I don't want to say monitoring, but being with the applicant throughout the process, and then happening on the back end of it. So no, I'm good. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks, Sydney. Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. I actually have a question for John Flynn as the Chair of the Board. It's good to see you here today. As the Chair of the Board, the responsibility for strategic direction sits with you. Could you speak to the current strategic plan?
The question?
As the Chair of the Board, the strategic direction for this Crown Corporation sits with you. Could you speak to the current strategic plan for IIDI? Is there a current strategic plan?
Current strategic plan, I think Jamie might be better to speak to that.
But it's your responsibility as the Chair of the Board to be able to speak to the strategic direction?
I don't think there's any change in what the strategic plan would have been since the inception of the board 2 years ago. And I go back to the mission statement. I suspect if you look in the presentation that was just done, I think the mission statement is in there somewhere, is it not? It spelled out what the board does, or IIDI does.
Copy of the presentation in front of me, but I'm asking you.
Well, I can't give you it in so many words, but the direction of the board would be the same as its inception back in 2018, I would believe, to promote industry on PEI, to retain immigrants where possible, to try and build and maintain an economy on PEI.
Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. Are you the signatory for federal provincial agreements, or is that done outside of IIDI? I recognise there's a number of complex agreements, but I'm just wondering what the role of the board is in those agreements.
Am I personally?
Yes.
No, I'm not.
It's the Minister of
Jamie?
Economic Growth and Tourism Culture is the signatory of our provincial nominee agreements.
Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. So the agreements are done at the ministerial level, not at the board.
So they would be taken to the board for consideration and discussion. The board would recommend it for execution with the minister. So it's typically the federal minister of Canada is the signatory on the agreements, along with our provincial counterpart.
Hannah?
Thank you. Are your board meetings minuted?
Sorry?
Are the board meetings minuted? Do you have to take minutes? Yeah.
Hannah?
And it's available to the public?
I believe so. Jamie would know if they're available to the
They're
public
not
more
posted
so.
on our website, but they are available. The minutes describe the discussion at the meetings. Any presentations are included along with the recommendation and the decision.
Hannah?
Thank you. And then decisions are around, particularly around loans, are done through order in council?
Order in council occur when the loan's in excess of 2.5 million, but any loan in excess of $100,000 is disclosed on our provincial website.
Hannah?
Thank you. You'd said that earlier. There was the what, below 1 million, between 1 million, 2.5. Got right. Thank you for that. So when you have objectives that you're working towards, particularly around financing and growing the economy, are you looking at financials and metrics during your board meetings, or are you just doing review on decisions? Like, you have a strategic plan and goals you're trying to reach. How are you reviewing, and this is a question for the chair, how are you reviewing and reporting against your progress against your strategic plan on an ongoing basis?
The meetings are usually held to discuss or to review new applications, and we review the loans quarterly to see any loans that are of concern. So we watch to make sure that whatever applications are coming in, or we try to ensure that whatever applications are coming in are in the best interests of IDI and the provincial economy. And we keep an eye, I guess, like I said earlier, the quarterly reports come out for the loans that are, excuse me, that IDI has, and that some may be of concern. So members are free to ask questions about the status of the loans, and board members, or sorry, IDI staff are available to answer those questions if there's concerns or comments about the loans.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to, one housekeeping. So because we have four guests with us today, you'll notice that on your microphone there's a little red dot whenever you are mic'd. And so we just need to wait for that red dot to come on before we speak so that we can capture it and answer it. Just to, we know it, but, and also on this side, we'll just remember, because we're going quickly back and forth. So just for the AV and the audio, or sorry, the audio and the cameras, we just need to be gentle. They don't move that fast. So Hannah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if my light is on. now I'm going to be paranoid. Do this. Thank you, Chair, and to the Chair of IIDI. You'd mentioned the best interests of IIDI and the PEI economy. What are those? Like, you've got a very general thing about raising capital, providing financing. So what are you measuring that against? What is in the best interests of IIDI? Is it to maintain cash in the cash account, or is it to reduce the default rate? Like, there must be a way that you're measuring that.
Well, I don't know how best to answer that. I think the best interest of IDI would be not to invest in a business that could possibly fail. How it's measured, I think, is in probably best measured by the quarterly loan review that we do. You can see loans are rated if they're good, bad, or indifferent. Questionable loans are, again, picked apart, or we're free to ask questions. So I guess I see the IDI's and the island's best interest as, you know, promoting business, trying to bring new business to the area, supporting existing business, and bringing in immigrants and retaining them. So measured, I guess somebody else could speak to that, possibly Jamie or Jeff.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I'm not sure what yardsticks. I guess the presentation did some speaking to that.
Okay, Jamie?
Did that turn on?
Yes, you were good. Thanks.
One other criteria that IDI completes on an annual basis is we do an economic impact of the loan portfolio, where we gather financial information from all our loan clients looking at their sales, their wages, and their capital investments. And we hire an economist that generates a report of what the economic activity from the loan portfolio was for that period of time. So this most current year's report is being completed right now. It's been held up a little bit with getting information with COVID impacting a lot of the different companies. But the previous 2 years are on our website, which show what the economic impact of our loan portfolio was. At the end of the day, there's a lot of different variables that we can be evaluated on. First and foremost is your financial statements. Are we able to be self-sustaining? And fortunately, IIDI as well as Finance PEI receives no appropriation from Treasury Board in the sense that it is self-sustaining and continues to operate in that practice. With IIDI, it's a bit diverse with regards to its two focus, both on economic generation from the loan portfolio, but also from the PMP program, which has two primary focuses in my mind, both on attracting skilled labor as well as entrepreneurs, but then also the economic impacts those families bring to our province, along with the cultural aspects they also contribute. So there's a lot of different variables that are there. We try and evaluate on an annual basis both the quantitative, the impact of the loan portfolio, but also looking at our retention rates that the federal government also monitors, because immigration changes very rapidly, and we have to watch the needle on the speedometer, so to speak, to make sure that we make the appropriate changes too in our programs. I think we've been making some good changes to our programs. Are we perfect? Are we there yet? No. I think there's always going to be room for improvement. We're going to continue to try and take the best practices from other jurisdictions.
Hannah?
Thank you for that, and I think I appreciate you sort of, speaking to reflecting the change, and obviously there's been some significant changes certainly to the immigration program. I guess that comes back to sort of be talking about a strategic plan, is that, when you have a corporation that has such a significant portfolio and impact, this is probably one of the most impactful Crown corporations that we have, not just in terms of the asset value, but we can see the tangible impact, whether it's from a small business or a manufacturing firm that's been able to expand, or new people moving into our communities across the province. This has a huge footprint. And so a strategic direction is really critical, not just in terms of do we know where we're trying to go, but how do we measure that as we go so we can change? We don't want to wait until it goes horribly sideways to have to make those changes. So the reason I'm asking about that is the objectives and the goals are really broad. But on a quarterly basis or an annual basis, what do we see? What are we measuring it against? I'm also really happy to hear you talk not just about economic impact in terms of dollars, which is huge, but socioeconomic impact, retention rate, in what communities are being impacted. And so as a board and as a board that has that representation from across the province, and not just from in government, those strategic markers are really important to tell the story of why this kind of activity matters, so that we don't get stuck with headlines or media wanting to talk to you about the stuff that isn't actually the story. When you talk about one of the pieces that we didn't spend as much time on in the presentation was the Sentry Fund. And to whomever, probably Jamie, but to whomever, in terms of developmental lending and for lenders who can't potentially get financing from charter banks, again, what's the criteria that you're using to make a decision on whether that money goes out the door? So before it becomes a loan with a risk assessment, as Mr. Flynn identified, you're doing something first.
100%.
So what's happening there? Is that happening at the board? Is that happening from like a business plan? What's the story there?
Great question. With any loan application, there's a comprehensive business plan that's submitted to us, depending on the size of the business, of course. We would get an application which gathers a lot of the tombstone data with regards to who the shareholders are, a disclosure on the location, the manufacturing, or the industry that they operate within. We get historical financial statements, which are typically prepared by their accountant, but if they're not prepared by their accountant, we can get tax returns. things of that nature. We also ask for projections. Where do they envision that this company is going to go? And then my staff, which have financial training, review that and challenge it, put it through sensitivity analysis. If the assumptions were not as high as they anticipated, let's say they were only 75% or 60%, what impact does that do to cash flow? Where's the break-even point for this company as it continues to operate? We also look at hard security. What hard security can be pledged? Is the security shortfall? Is the security very user-specific, that it has limited resale value, it's only really valuable for a certain industry or certain company? All that analysis goes into the submission. The loans officers typically review that information with their colleagues, where they do peer-to-peer discussions. Then they may come to talk with myself, and we would review it collectively, and we challenge each other and compare it to industry averages. In this day and age, there's a lot of information available that we can utilize to tap into to do our due diligence. Then we write up the credit. We do a risk assessment based on various criteria, from management to industry to security, with a variety of different components, and we rank that risk assessment of that credit. We take it to our boards and we have a presentation and a discussion. If the credit's greater than $1 million, then we also take it to Treasury Board and it goes through that discussion. I'm usually in Treasury Board almost every week, where we're discussing credits and reviewing information. And I can tell you that there's very good questions, and they're reviewing and they're challenging assumptions and making sure that we've looked at all different aspects. So as alluded in the presentation, like, our loans are secured at the best that they can. We take hard security, land, buildings, equipment. We also take personal guarantees. We want to make sure that if we're in, you're in as well. And one of those criteria is we want their personal guarantee. We'll also look at related companies. Companies are becoming more sophisticated between intercompany transactions, so if we need to take cross-corporate guarantees of one company to another, we'll look at that. And we'll also look at the financial statements of related companies. So it's not black and white, but that's why we have peer-to-peer discussions and discussions with our boards, and we put it through the ringer.
Hannah?
Chair, if I can ask one further question in this round, and then perhaps come back. Yeah, so recognizing it's not the same level of potential investment, what level of due diligence is brought to business plans submitted for those coming through the business impact category?
Sure, do you want to go ahead, Joe?
So through the business impact category, part of the application process, as you alluded to, is they must present a business plan to our office. So the first step of that is the business plan has to be prepared in concert with the applicant by a certified professional accounting firm. So it is done by an accounting firm with CPAs doing projections. So once we do that, then it comes to our office. We have staff who review it beforehand. Each client has to do an interview with our office as well. So they submit the business plan before the interview. Our staff reviews the business plan. 2 of our staff members review it independently, and then similar to the lending side, they do a peer-to-peer review and kind of chat about what the issues may be within the business plan. Then during the interview with the client has to basically discuss the business plan with our officers, so they're free to ask any questions that they want to with regards to the business plan, be it the marketing plan, the staffing plan, whatever it may be. So we do go through that process. After the interview is complete, the officers will kind of get together again. They'll review the interview as well as the business plan again, and if it's a feasible plan, they'll suggest to make a recommendation for the application to go forward at that point.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Carla?
Thank you, Chair. The way my brain works in any presentation is kind of seeing beyond the numbers and seeing the people that are a result of these numbers, I guess we'll say. So I was really pleased to hear that there's collaboration with social development and housing and education. So when I heard about the residential development, the housing developments, one of the important pieces that Sydney mentioned was being a part of the community. And so I can imagine, especially in more rural areas where it is hard to to make new friends. I hear that from people all the time. How do you make friends and keep them? And that's really important to anyone's quality of life. And so when I heard housing developments, I thought, I hope that that's a community housing. It's not just for new people in the community, because that just further alienates people. So I hope that in these collaboration goes beyond just looking at housing, and beyond looking at education, and looking at exactly what that means and understanding what that means to everyone involved. And and as I consider public schools, I can remember on so many occasions, I taught grade 1, and on so many occasions there would be teachers around me who would all of a sudden, without much warning, have this little 6-year-old in front of them who could not speak a word of English. And there were no supports for these teachers. And so one of the superstars in particular I can think of who I worked with, she went home that night and spent her whole night, she had the time, had 3 young children, went home and spent her whole night printing off things like a toilet and a fountain and food, so that the child could point to it, and she put the English word on the bottom for them. She asked them to put it in their own language if they could write. She sent it home with the parents and asked the parents to write the word for that so that they could. And this child flourished, but would not have had it not been for the initiative that single teacher took. And so when I think about the collaboration that's happening, or the consultation that's happening with Department of whatever, it has to go beyond talking to the top dogs in those departments, because the message or is not necessarily trickling down, and they may not quite understand what it's like to have. Of course, I'm speaking to children because that's kind of what I've done for so long. That they have this little child in front of them who can't use their words to have their basic needs met, and how incredibly scary that must be. Getting on a school bus, all of those things. And so I really encourage you to, I don't know what consultations look like, but I really encourage you to kind of to go further with those and deeper with those. And so I guess one of the questions that I have is, an important piece of this is the recipients of these programs, their experience. And so are there regular interviews that happen with them that go beyond the how's your business going or that thing, and say, how do you feel safe? Are you happy? How is your quality of life?
Yeah, I'll start. Appreciate your comments, very well articulated. Jeff and myself had an opportunity to do a presentation in March of this current year with English as a second language instructors. And there was probably 30 instructors that we met with, and we provided an overview of immigration. And at the end, when we had the discussion, it was very eye-opening to hear firsthand some of the challenges and things that they're working through. And I think we've been very fortunate. We have a good working relationship with Janet Perry Payne with the Department of Education, and gathering that information, you're right, is critical for retention and integration of any new person to a community. We are working also with the Department of Education and trying to gather some information on individuals that may be leaving PEI. We're at the very early stages. We're only one cog in the key, and I don't want to be the sole driver. And if we can gather information from families that may be leaving the department or leaving the province, if we can gather that through an education relationship, I think that could be invaluable. Because sometimes when they meet with us from an immigration point of view, they're very reluctant to tell us some certain things for a variety of reasons. So I know that's one thing that we worked within our department, is how are we gathering information? Is there better ways of collecting it so that we can adapt our programs or our funding arrangements so that we can be responsive? So good.
And just one other thing to add, we do work quite closely with the Newcomers Association, and I know they do surveys on a regular basis of the newcomer communities. So we're very, very engaged with the Newcomers Association, and we meet with ethnocultural associations one-on-one within our office to kind of chat about how their membership are feeling. Sometimes that's the best way to kind of reach out to those communities, because as Jamie alluded to, individuals are sometimes hesitant to come forward to chat about, you know, their personal situations with government. So we try to go through the ethno-cultural associations and their representatives to, you know, kind of communicate that way and let them know if there's anything they need as far as supports, that they can reach out to us and kind of, you know, keep our ear to the ground that way.
Carla?
That's really great to hear. I think that that's a really great practice to have, and I would challenge you to make that part of your official mechanism for gathering data, not just, and I appreciate, you know, being an immigration office, it may be uncomfortable for people to talk about certain things. They may not think it's appropriate, language barriers, all of those things. But if we could make some sort of official mechanism where we're not just interviewing people when they exit, so that we can work on those things so that they aren't just statistics because they left, but that they are statistics because they're part of our population and they're making our population richer in so many ways. So yeah, I think I'll just leave that there for now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carla. Gord?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for coming in. And this is relating to maybe picking up on a little bit, but you mentioned young entrepreneurs or UPI and Holland College students who have settled here. You know, creating and enhancing diversity is one of the goals of the program, and we see that. Can you let us know the different demographics of different various individuals who have come to PEI in terms of nationality? Where are they coming from? I guess that'd be my first question.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to.
So every year in our annual report, we do have a section in there with regards to demographics. So as Jamie said in the presentation, our annual report will be made public here in the next 24 to 48 hours. But what I can tell you, basically, the top 5 at this point would be India, China, Vietnamese, Filipino, and then there's a couple of, I think there's a couple of Caribbean countries, Jamaica and one other that are kind of rounds out the top 5. So those would be the top 5. And then I can't remember do you remember what the number of total ethnicities we have that come through our programs?
Yeah, so approximately 54% are from India, 15% are from the Philippines, 8% from China, 2% from Jamaica, and then approximately 20% are from all other countries. So we're seeing, even that has changed a lot over the last, I would say, 10 years, where we're seeing a lot of our applicants coming from. Not unlike any other jurisdiction or the federal government of Canada, it seems to be changing very dramatically.
Gord?
And it's great to see, and I think there's a lot of talent here that go. I talk to a lot of students that go and they want to stay and they're looking for that program. In your office, I know you do a lot with the Newcomers Association. In your office, have you? Is it diverse? Or I know I saw Letty on your board. She's great. But are you looking at more diversity to meet your clients' needs?
Yeah, we actually have several staff members, Chinese staff members. We have staff members who are from Middle East. So we do have that capacity to, you know, if somebody's more comfortable speaking in their home language, we do have several different languages of choice that we can provide service for in our office. Obviously, we're always looking to diversify within our office itself. But, you know, as far as what we do, we do have quite a few individuals from different ethnic backgrounds within the office.
So we have staff that can speak Mandarin, some Cantonese, Farsi, French, and English. And Persian, thank you.
Gord?
And I know, just representing my area, that I know a lot of people come and they stay, and I have good communication with them. But they're always kind of working in rural Prince. I remember you had a slide up there where they're working in rural Prince Edward Island. Do you have the demographics for where those people are living? Are they living in rural Prince Edward Island, or?
That's a bit of an art as opposed to a science. We're trying to gather that. It's easier to validate with the companies that the individuals are still working with them. I would suggest that might be something that we'd be trying to complete here in the next 3 to 4 months with doing some additional surveys. I would probably venture to say we'd partner with the Association for Newcomers or another third party to help with that collection of data, because I think there could be a lot of good information we could collect that would help both the settlement providers but also our office as well. So that's something we'll have to tackle.
Gord?
Just a few questions on, you had mentioned that the loan program is paused.
On the residential.
Yeah, on the residential. Just a few questions around that. How long has it been paused? Why is it paused?
It's for approximately a month to a month and a half. It was just to provide an opportunity to do a quick review. The applications had slowed down, where we weren't receiving very many. And we also want to make sure the applications were focused in rural PEI. We see that as a real focus of what we wanted the program to be financing. And when we had the chart up there, we were seeing Surrey, Montague, Tignish, Summerside, and Charlottetown as well. And we were wanting to review, should we only make rural PEI an eligible area to look at the financing. So that's one thing that we're looking at. We're also trying to work with the Department of Social Development and Housing to gather information from CMHC to what they're financing, what they're seeing in the marketplace. You don't have to drive too far right now to see some residential complexes going up, so we want to get a handle on that. I understand that they're working with some different municipalities to get building permits to gather that. So I don't think it's closed by any stretch. It might be, how do we adjust it to ensure it's getting the best results possible?
Gord?
You did mention that you're working with social development and housing, which I'm not really 100% thrilled with how they've attacked housing in the last year. And so to hear this, it's kind of troubling, giving the numbers coming out on housing, and I just want to know that we need some clear direction around funding this. And I mean, construction industry is busy, but I don't see the clear direction. So I just thought I'd add those comments for right now. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Gord. Heath?
Well, it's good to see some of the changes that we implemented are actually starting to work, so that's wonderful. But I just sit on the economic side for a second. So we're in a pandemic, and the challenge for many businesses that have loans with you, I would assume, would be a default in payment possibly over the next, or maybe it already has happened. Can you give us any information on how many loans are in default, basically in the last year, or maybe even since COVID?
Don't have that information with me here, member. That's something I could possibly take back. We're working closely with the companies, however, in our portfolio, where companies, if they need to defer payments for a period of time, we're asking them to provide us financial information. So if they can provide us some interim financial statements, an explanation to what's going on in their business unit, as well as what they may be potentially seeing in the industry. And then my staff, myself, are working with those companies where we'll provide deferrals for 3 to 6 months and then encourage the company to come back and give us a further update. We're trying to be responsive to the companies as opposed to giving a deferral right across the portfolio as an entirety. So we're trying to work with individual companies. Some industries that are struggling, obviously tourism, I think, is one area that the numbers were not as strong this year. So we'll work closely with those operators and see what we can do to help.
Keith?
So I guess I was looking at likely potato farmers up in certain areas in the hospitality industry, which have been hit pretty hard. So hopefully they can be deferred, those payments.
Exactly.
Heath?
Just curious too, what is your loan loss provision for 1920 total? You have that?
Loan loss provision.
I guess what I'm saying is, has it changed since 18, 19, 19, 20?
Yes, in this most recent year, our loan loss provision is up this year, considering the factors of where the economy is at. Overall, the portfolio is strong, but we do know that there is some sectors that are going to be experience a longer recovery plan or recovery path than others. And so this year, our provision is up, and I can definitely get that number and bring it back to the committee.
Heath?
Just the other thing, I know the federal government in the hospitality industry, and we've seen that in the news in the last 2 or 3 days, and I know in the economic tourism budget, there's an extra 10 million sitting there. And maybe this is a question for Aaron. Is the province willing to disperse that 10 million that was set aside as extra monies in that budget for COVID response to some of these industries, or the hospitality industry in particular, going forward, because we're starting to see places close up and maybe not even open again, or you know, you're hearing all kinds of stories and rumors, but I'm wondering if that 10 million will be at some point dispersed, or dispersed alongside what the federal government intends to do.
Perfect, so I'll answer that one. I'll wait for my light.
Aaron, yeah.
Is it
Yeah, you're good.
good? Okay. So the $10 million, I believe the one you're mentioning is the contingency fund for the department as a whole. We also have $5 million that were set aside as a contingency fund for tourism PEI specifically. So the 10 million one, I wouldn't necessarily dedicate it entirely to tourism, but of course that tourism one would be dedicated specifically for that industry. And that is in addition to the programs that we've already kind of run out with. So I might let Jamie speak more to the tourism loan portfolio and the tourism interest relief program, which was the primary one that we've run out so far, specific for the tourism industry. But then also the tourism industry has been eligible for any of our other programming. The Business Adaptation Advice Fund was quite popular amongst many of them to really, you know, early days of the pandemic, many of them were questioning, do I even open? So helping them obtain some advice from, you know, their accountant or, you know, maybe a marketer to really kind of figure out what their options are for this year was quite popular. Also the Workspace Adaptation Fund out of Innovation PEI to fund, you know, plexiglass or, you know, whatever it may have been to adapt their workplace for their operational plan. But you know, beyond that, I'll let kind of Jamie speak to what he has seen with the tourism interest relief, because that's really where we've seen probably the bulk of our interaction with tourism operators specific to programs thus far.
So the Tourism Interest Relief Program, there was a $10 million fund established to cover or reimburse operators their interest monthly expense, provided they were down 30%. So operators apply on a monthly basis, showing us their interim financial statements month over month compared to the prior year. We also ask for GST returns or HST returns to validate those numbers. Provided they're down 30%, the fund will disperse the amount equal to the interest obligations to chartered banks. The fund is capped at $400,000 for any collective group of companies. We continue to monitor this, and we go to Treasury Board on a 2 to 3 month basis, giving an update of how the fund is progressing. Approximately $2 million has been paid out of the $10 million so far to date, and we're continuing to ensure that we can try and get that message out. So I know Kent McDonald, the CEO of Tourism PEI, sends out information with the different tourism groups. I've reached out to the different accounting firms and law firms to ensure that they also share the information about that program. We also have a tourism loan program where we make available different financing and also the emergency working capital. And then we also want to work with our existing clients that, you're right, remember, they have some very hard cash flow issues ahead of them. We're here to work with them. We don't want to cause any more stress, but if we can defer some payments, defer principal and interest for a period of time until that company comes back, I think that's what we're here to do, is to work with those entrepreneurs.
Heath?
So I flipped immigration now, thank you. Just on your escrow, what is the value of the interest on that escrow on an annual basis, and what's it used for?
Like the interest?
Yeah.
So the interest typically right now is floating around 1.2 to 1.5% on the GICs. We can get sometimes a little bit higher rates at the 1.5 when we lock in for 3 years. But it is a very low risk investment, and that's why the interest rates are low. The interest is reported in my financial statements for Island Investment Development, Inc. Years past, we've looked at various different settlement programs that we could support through IIDI. Or there was one year we provided some funding to the Department of Education to hire some additional EAL teachers. And then my financial statements are consolidated up into the government books. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at. If the support comes directly through IIDI, if it comes through the Department of Education or other departments, I guess.
Heath?
Just on some of your files, you never really talked much about the intermediaries. So I'm just kind of curious on what's the lag time now from the major changes that we made in 2018 as a government? Like how many files are still in the queue from that period on the PMP side?
From 2018, we have no files in our office. They all been processed, so they're either with the federal government of Canada for their assessment for admissibility, or they're fulfilling their obligations now under their escrow agreement. So we have not received any files since September 2018, and we have no files in our office.
Heath?
Just on the intermediary question, is that basically can't even remember how many companies, 8 or 10 or whatever it is? 12, thanks. Is that being drawn relatively equal because those intermediaries are in different parts of the province, some of them I think?
No, so right now we use the expression of interest model. So the agents represent the foreign nationals. They give them immigration advice, help them prepare their application, give them guidance on the various different program requirements. Then they go into the pool, the expression of interest pool, and they all receive points based on their education, their work experience, language capabilities, in their age, their connectivity to the province or any relationships they have here. And we then go into the pool and we select the highest 15, 20 candidates on a monthly basis. So there is no allocation to any one agent.
Heath?
Just one more. In terms of population growth, and you talked a little bit about housing and in rural PEI especially, what's the intention of the department? Like what's going to be your annual draw? Are you going to max out your annual draw on immigration, or because I know when Newfoundland didn't draw as much, we were through the Atlantic Growth Strategy, we were trying to take some of their numbers. Is that still in progress, and how does that relate to the issue we have in housing?
Yeah, so obviously, COVID has kind of, affected many jurisdictions this year with regards to, their allocations and utilization. For 2020, the calendar year 2020, that's how the federal government measures immigration as far as numbers goes. We anticipate that we're going to, maximize our allocation. We're going to come very close to our numbers in the PNP program. Atlantic Pilot, we've got quite a few there that we've been allocated this year. We're gonna maximize that as much as possible. So we anticipate that as far as our allocation goes and what we're nominating on an annual basis, we'll be very close to prior years as well. The lag is going to be with regards to the landing numbers from the federal government of Canada.
So historically, or this calendar year, we received approximately 1,200 nominations for the province PEI through their collective programs. That equates to approximately 2,400 persons because of the family units. As alluded to earlier, the vast majority of our nominations now are in our labor streams, and the vast majority of those, in excess of 95%, are already here working. So as we process this calendar year, there's not a tremendous amount of people entering the province. It's really we're processing who's here, either at a post-secondary institution that's graduated, or they're here on a temporary work permit. It's the years in the future with the federal government, if they're able to get the TFWs into the country. Hopefully we'll have a vaccine here shortly for COVID-19, which would allow more freedom of movement through international borders.
Okay, thanks, Heath. Ola?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It was really welcome changes to see the move towards having actual people, families coming in instead of bags of money. So I have a question to the 10% business thing, where you mentioned that the business coming in had to have a business here and have residents here. Now, we see an awful lot of completely empty stores. The doors are locked. I presume that it appears to be some of those business coming in. How do you actually check that the business is operating, and how do you check residency?
So as far as the business operations go, we do have staff. They do site visits throughout the year, several site visits at businesses. If we do find situations like you allude to, we ramp up site visits on those. We have discussions with the applicant as far as what their obligations are. So we do manage that process throughout the year. With regards to evaluating the business operation at the end of the year, we look at things like we require financial statements prepared by a CPA firm at a review engagement level that show that there is business activity. So we look at the revenues, the expenses, to see that they actually did operate during the year. With regards to residency, we look at items such as school enrollments, we look at power bills, we look at leases or purchase agreements for homes, we look at phone bills, we ask for bank statements to see that they've been making transactions in Prince Edward Island throughout the year. So we do a review of their operation and their residency here in PEI.
Ola?
Okay, thank you. I had another question relating to the loan portfolio. You know, I often, as a MLA, get asked this question: why do upper tier companies like the Irvings, the Murphy Group, and the APM receive substantial loans? What's the argument for the province being involved there?
Within the loan portfolio, there's a variety of different businesses that look for financing. We try and balance our portfolio through the different industries, so we're spread across tourism, agriculture, fisheries, manufacturing, IT, renewable energy. But also, when we do some developmental lending, it's good to also have some strong financial companies there as well to help spread the risk of any loan portfolio. I think if you look at any financial institution, they want to have a diverse portfolio, not all in one sector, but also have small, medium, and large companies all within that portfolio. So I think from a lending perspective, it's good to have that diversity, both for the small, medium, and large.
Ola?
Well, thank you for that answer. I appreciate the fact that you want to preserve your capital so that you'll have something to lend out in the future. You did, however, also mention that one of the criteria is for giving the loans, and now we're talking about the risky end of the scale, and you specifically mentioned, or the chair mentioned, that you're looking at could the company possibly fail? And I'm just wondering how you look at that risk, because it's precisely those kind of companies that might come up with innovative new products that haven't been seen before.
So with any loan, we primarily look at cash flow, as well as historical earnings and security. But when you look at a company's cash flow, you can get an appreciation that if they are going through a financial downturn in the economy, or there was something that happened to them where they had a recall on one of their manufacturing pieces of equipment, we can do the risk assessment to try and balance the risk reward. So if a company was weak on security, but maybe they had a large purchase order in the order book, that you could see that the cash flow was there, and you could work through the next 12 to 24 months that company was going to be able to service that debt. And I think that's where we try and balance the financial risk with the economic development, is taking security but also looking at cash flow and historical earnings and doing that risk assessment on management as well. Do they have the skills and attributes to stick handle through this difficult time, or the development of the company to the next stage? So it's a work in progress when we work with any companies, and we want to be responsive, and I think it's important to listen to the companies to understand what challenges they're facing and trying to tailor the program or the loan to their needs. So if you have a young startup company, maybe we should be deferring the interest and principal payments for 3 to 6 months to allow them to get the working capital up. And I think that's, to your original question, we try and include some of the big and medium-sized businesses there along with the small. But if you look at our loan portfolio, the average loan is approximately $300,000. That is still a lot of money, but we try and balance and ensure that we're also there for the small business. We have an entrepreneur loan program. We also have a microcredit loan program. We try and tailor our programs and work with our business entrepreneur community here in PEI.
Ola?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the answer. I have a couple of questions on housing. I find it really interesting that your department is into that. I understand you only give it to developers, and I was wondering what portion of the 100% that it takes to actually build the housing that you provide, which end of the spectrum is it?
So typically, we're looking for we only will finance multi-unit complexes. We'll look up towards 90% of the project. We won't do 100% of the project. We want the developer to come in with at least 10%. We've seen some developers come in with more than 10. The size of each development has ranged from 4 or 5 unit complex in Rustico to 8 complex in Surrey Tignish, and then we see some larger ones within the Summerside or the Charlottetown region. We also try and work with the community to ensure that they support the development, that they see the need of that residential complex there. We've seen some good response. I know my staff, we went and had some sessions in various communities in rural PEI to try and talk with developers. Before we implemented this program, we also went out and we consulted with the developers, where we met with approximately 30 different developers in Montague and Summerside and here in Charlottetown to get some feedback to try and understand where the pressures were. We capped the program that we wouldn't look at any one project in excess of $4 million because we want to look at the smaller projects. CMHC and the charter banks are typically financing the bigger ones, and that's fine. We wanted to try and fill a gap on the housing, and that's what we were hearing. It was the smaller complexes of 3 to 10 units in rural PEI. Some of the developers were finding hard to get financing for.
Ola?
Thank you. So are you only working with developers, and if so, why are you not working with non-profits, housing cooperatives?
We have worked with a nonprofit, absolutely. Maybe I'm not using the right terminology, and I apologize for that. A developer to me could be a nonprofit or a for-profit entity. I look at the entity as constructing the residential complex.
Ola?
So in consideration giving you a loan, I take the 4 million limit as the total value of the project?
Correct.
Do you look or demand for affordability criteria being built in?
Yes. Obviously, affordability is a criteria that we see as tremendous value. Having said that, it's the developer that is constructing the complex. I would venture to say, I don't have the stats here in front of me, but I believe over half of them are affordable in a variety of different components, but I can definitely take that back and double check.
Ola?
I take it affordability is by definition something like 80% of market rate as opposed to...
I believe that is the market, yeah.
Thank you very much, yeah.
Okay,
Enough.
great, thanks. Corey?
Thank you, Chair. Jamie, could you expand a bit on the role that municipalities play in immigration?
Sure, do you want to talk, Jeff?
So I guess through our business program, when we launched the expression of interest model in 2018, we brought in a community endorsement model. So that allowed applicants through the program to visit a municipality. We had, I'm going to say, 12 municipalities who expressed interest in participating in the program. So it allowed applicants the opportunity to visit a municipality, meet with individuals there, with the town or the city, present their business concept to them, have a discussion. If it was something that the municipality, the town, the city felt comfortable with, they would issue the applicant what they call a community endorsement. So if an applicant had that community endorsement, it would enable them to get a number of points within the EOI system. If that individual is drawn and applies and is approved through our process, the expectation is that when they arrive here in PEI, they will set up the business there in that community that has given them the endorsement. So that's through our business program. That's how we've kind of engaged municipalities on that side of things. On the labor side, it's largely an employer-driven program, so we do have a number of large employers in rural and in the cities who are engaged in immigration. So that's kind of how that works on the labor side.
Corey?
And How many come in through the business program? Was that?
So this year, we're inviting close to 200 through the business program this year, so that's kind of our standard applications. As Jamie alluded to before, an invitation to apply doesn't necessarily mean an application, so there will be some follow-up there, but we invite about 200 on an annual basis.
Corey?
And do you have the stats of where they're going, which municipalities?
Yeah, we do keep track of who's giving community endorsements and the applicants who we've approved, where they will be going. Yeah.
Corey?
You don't have them here, do you?
I don't have them here.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I can bring that back if you.
Okay,
like.
perfect.
Yeah.
Because I know, thanks, Chair, I think Three Rivers hasn't been doing anything, from what I understand, since they amalgamated. Am I correct?
Yeah, they were very engaged at the beginning of the process. The town of Montague and also
Yeah.
Georgetown were quite engaged. When the amalgamation took place, they did take a pause on becoming active in the program. Recently, actually, we've had outreach from members in the community kind of asking how they can get re-engaged. So I think there is some work going on behind the scenes to kind of get back involved in that process. And our office is more than welcome to work with them on whatever we can do for them.
Corey?
Is it something that obviously the town or the community or the city would have to take the initiative on, but like would IIDI work with? I guess it's too bad that Three Rivers is missing out on these opportunities, and I've had a number of people come to me say that the town isn't doing any of this. Where Summerside lays out the red carpet and gives them the tour, and, checks up on them, every month. How are you getting along?
Yeah.
So I think we're missing out on a big opportunity. Is it?
And that's
something you've reached out to Three Rivers to say, can we work with you to help you?
Yeah, we have done some outreach. I'll have to go back to the staff that was doing that just in the last kind of several months since COVID, got back to normal, whatever that is. We have started doing some outreach. I'll follow up with our staff member to see if they have discussed with Three Rivers and what the response has been, but our office is more than welcome to reach out and kind of share best practices, if you will, on what some other communities are doing. You mentioned Summerside, and yes, they do a very good job with their newcomer entrepreneurs and the process and how they manage the system. So we're more than happy to reach out and offer support wherever we can.
Corey?
You mentioned the retention rate after 1 year. Do we have any stats on after 1 year?
Yeah, so retention rate is it's a challenging thing to measure, and historically what the federal government has done is they've used tax filer data. So when an individual gets permanent residency, within their social insurance number there's a unique identifier in there that tells the federal government which province they were nominated through. And with the tax filer data, there's always a lag on how recent that they can analyze the tax filer or the tax information. So I believe they're currently looking at 2017 tax information today, which then they will roll out here in the next couple of months of what the retentions rates were for the province for 1, 2, and 5 years. The challenge with that measurement is it's measuring programs that are no longer being administered by some jurisdictions. So if they're using 2017 tax filer, that means they had to have landed most likely in the province PEI in 2016 with federal processing times of 16 months. That most likely means they were nominated probably 2014 or maybe 2015. So it's measuring retention of programs from 2013, 14, 15. When we're making programs changes today, they're not being reflected in those retention numbers. The Atlantic pilot number that we shared, that was the federal government. They went out and actually surveyed applicants outside of tax filer data. So we're going to continue to work with them to try and find alternative ways of getting retention. Tax filer is a great measure. It's just sometimes it's very dated, and it's also measuring programs that are no longer in existence.
Corey?
So right now we don't, after the 1 year mark, we don't really have anything that...
No, for the pilot we have the 1 year, but we're going to continue to work and try and gather more information. The pilot's relatively new. I think over time we'll get some more data, but so far the early indications are positive.
Corey?
And I know a few members had mentioned housing. is there an issue trying to recruit, to get immigrants to come here because we don't have housing? Is that ever?
I think it's always a challenge, especially with our labor applicants. Companies are responsible to work with the temporary foreign worker to ensure that they have housings and accommodations. I commend some of the businesses here in PE. I think they've been very innovative, and they've looked at different projects themselves and how they can offer housing, where they have either constructed residential housing themselves or they have renovated facilities that were not being utilized, if it was a former hotel or motel or some of that nature. So I think companies have been innovative in trying to resolve that. They've looked at other solutions, and they look with developers for opportunities to maybe collaboratively work together.
Corey?
Because I think it's, like, immigration's good. We need to bring people in, and it's good to bring business in and whatnot. But, I've always felt that it's always been, well, let's get as many people to come as possible, but there's no, obviously now, like a lot of islanders say they can't afford to buy a home because it's, we've driven the price of homes up, land. Do we have the infrastructure in place to handle a population growth that much? I don't know if you have comments on that or not, but is it just kind of let's get as many as we can every year without?
It's definitely a balance. Like, we're working with companies that are trying to fill vacancies. As we alluded to before, 90% of our nominations are labor, and they have jobs. So these companies are looking very diligently to find these skill sets because they're growing their business and they have to fulfill their orders. That's where I think it's a joint responsibility between our department, working closely with the Department of Social Development and Housing, but also the company that is bringing in the skilled labor, that we work collectively to try and address the housing challenge. Also with the financing, like CMHC, I think has done a very good job. They've gotten very aggressive on trying to getting financing out. And I think there's been a lot of construction over the last 12 months, and hopefully there will be even more construction. So hopefully we're in the right path.
Corey?
The CBDC centers across PEI, now I don't know, this might be a better question for Aaron, and they have loan portfolios as well. Do you guys work with them at all?
Yep.
Okay.
So we're in discussions with CBDC and various different entrepreneurs, business applications. We've partnered with them on different projects. It's not uncommon that we'll work with a CBDC or a BDC or a COA and a chartered bank. So we all have different programs that may be able to leverage different financing. With a COA, they typically provide financing that's unsecured, so that provides security that can be pledged to the CBDC or ourselves. So yeah, no, we work with all financial institutions.
Corey?
That's good, thanks.
Great. I'm just going to jump in and ask a few questions. Our members have asked some really great questions, but first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Auditor General reports, and I know that IIDI had 2 performance audits completed, and 100% of those recommendations were implemented, and I want to recognize that because as chair, I appreciate the priority that you put on those recommendations and how you valued implementing those. It's not always what we see here at this committee, so I just wanted to say thank you and recognize that. What I do want to ask around the retention ratios. So when I look at the defaults over the last 4 years. So in 2016 it was 5 million. 2017, 18 million, 2018, 17 million, again, same for 2019. I'm just trying to align that with the percentage of defaults. So can you just go through, so for instance, in 2017, would that align with the 2016, 2017 numbers in your slide, or would that align with the 2017, 2018 number?
The fiscal numbers?
Yeah.
It should align, like the 2016, 17 on the chart would match the financial statements that were presented.
Okay. So I'm just trying to, when we look through this, I mean, the defaults are still fairly high dollar-wise, like 18 million, 17 million, 17 million. When you identify that there was only 94 defaults in 2019, 2020, but we still saw $16 million in defaults. The numbers seem a little skewed to me, and I'm wondering if you could walk me through what that actually means.
It's a good question, and I should have clarified that. That's my error. When the escrow program commenced back in 2015-16, the amount was $100,000.
Right.
Over the years, the escrow was increased to act as a deterrent from individuals from defaulting. So it increased from 100 to 150, then to 200,000 for the last number of years. So you can see that you're right, member, that the number of defaults has actually come down, but the value of an escrow has gone up.
Okay.
We were making program changes with the vision that a higher amount would be a stronger deterrent for someone from defaulting.
Okay.
And I think it did help with that, but transitioning to the work permit model guarantees 100% compliance, because they will not get permanent residency until they fulfilled their economic criteria of their performance agreement.
Okay. And was that a Canada-wide initiative to increase the amount, or was that provincially?
It's a provincial decision, but we were following in concert with other jurisdictions. Manitoba and New Brunswick are two provinces to come to my mind quickly here that also had similar escrow models. They were increasing their escrow threshold as well, so we stayed in step.
Okay. And so obviously, I mean, when you look at the retention rates, which are going up, we're up to 71%. Can you tell me where that retention rate ranks with other jurisdictions across Canada?
Are you talking retention rate or the default rate on the?
Well, 6 of one, half dozen of another, right? So
yeah.
either way, like we can talk about defaults. It's at 29% right now for
Yeah.
PEI. Where does that stand with everybody else?
So like 70% would be comparable to other Atlantic provinces, which is where we really kind of compare ourselves to. You know, other jurisdictions across the country, such as Ontario, BC, Alberta, they would have much higher retention rates just because they have larger metropolitan areas, they have larger populations of newcomers to begin with, those communities there. Mm-hmm. So a 70% rate would be comparable with other Atlantic areas, which is, again, what we compare ourselves to.
Okay, and what would it be in Ontario and BC, for instance?
Oh, 80 to 90%. I don't have the number in front of it, but it would be, I would anticipate it would be the high 80s in those right. jurisdictions.
And so, and where I'm going with that is just what you said. There's already established communities. There's already, you know, a lot of social programs that are available. What learnings, what best practice learnings do you take from those provinces that have higher retention rates and try to implement here?
I think we've tried to, you know, we've looked at settlement services. We try to support newcomers wherever we can through our office. The department as a whole funds the PEI Newcomers Association. We fund some small business support through the PEI Connectors Program. The federal government as well, we sit on several working group tables with federal and provincial counterparts. Settlement is one of them. So we talk about settlement services that are available through the federal government. I know that a new program that was launched this year through the federal government through settlement funding was the Navigator program. I believe each county has an immigration navigator through federal fund programs to help with settlement services. So we do try to work with the federal government as well as service providers here to kind of determine, you know, what are the needs of the community, how can we assist, how can we support.
Okay. So usually when we compare numbers, we try to normalize them so that we're actually comparing apples to apples. And like we had discussed already in 2018, the programs changed. Has there been any normalization for that in the retention numbers that you've provided to us, or is that just based on whatever program it was? That's what it is.
That's right.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that because of the change of the actual program, our retention rate is increasing because of the program change?
I believe one of the key program changes is that we want the individuals that are going through our programs for immigration purposes residing here before they make application. They integrate into the community, they're part of the cultural fabric of PEI, they're economically established if they're working for a company or they've started their business. And I think that was one of the best practices that we've taken from all jurisdictions as well as the Government of Canada, is having that integration into the community before the immigration process starts is invaluable. Because the person understands and the family unit understands what PEI has to offer or any other jurisdiction has to offer. And it's a good fit both ways.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess what I'm just getting at is sometimes we keep running the same programs year after year. When the numbers get better, we say it's working. But when you change another variable, then potentially the program's not working. So maybe your integration programs are not working. Maybe there is other strategic aspects that you could be looking at from a retention perspective. Because when you change one variable for the better and the others don't also change, are they working? And that's what I would encourage now, is to peel that onion back a little bit further. To go, okay, we fixed this, now what do we need to fix moving forward? So when we talk about the escrow account, so 2018 it was 215,000, in 2019 it was 173, and now I believe you said it's 120.
20, correct. Million.
Yes. Oh, sorry, I was saying thousand. You knew what I meant.
Yes,
120 million. Where do you anticipate that that's going to level out now with the changes in the program?
So these ones are still going to be processed under the 2018 agreements that the applicant signed. I believe we'll be refunding greater than 70%. Because we're continuing to work with the Association for Newcomers and the PEI Connectors programs with the different chambers across PEI, as well as our staff are trying to meet and provide assistance where possible. We want to work and help as opposed to dictate that these are the rules. So if we can help them integrate and give them good practices, I'm optimistic that 70% will continue to improve. And based on the chart, I don't see anything that would change.
Okay. All right. And sorry, I got a little distracted.
No.
Okay. So you invest those in GICs because
Correct.
cash has to
restricted
stay
cash.
on hand.
That's right.
And you said that you tender that out to a whole slew of whoever wants to respond to it.
Yes.
Have you ever done an analysis that if you took a certain amount of that and gave it to, for instance, a credit union, which then invests in businesses here in the province specifically, so I'm looking at local procurement, have you looked at what impacts that has as a whole? Because when you look at IIDI, it is about working towards community, as is the credit union. So have you done any analysis on how you invest that money and what I guess impacts that it has moving forward? Like,
It's
do you know what I mean?
restricted cash, and I would be very cautious about lending that money or providing that money to another entity. At the end of the day, that money is the foreign nationalists. Provided that they fulfill their obligations, that money has to be returned to them. So I
Right.
can't put it at risk.
Let me clarify that. So you are investing it into GIC.
Correct.
So when you put that into a lending institution, they leverage it to
They buy
do
government.
their own thing, right?
They're buying federal government bonds.
Right.
The federal government of Canada. So very secure investments that when it matures in 2 years, the federal government of Canada returns the cash, then I would assess that applicant's
Okay.
agreement.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay. And just another, before I move, because I know we have another round. So the Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry did, I believe it was last year, did a report on the importance of value-added services in agriculture. And a number of the recommendations around that were around temporary foreign workers and decreasing the length of time that it takes in order to process folks coming into the province. Can you tell me if you have looked within agriculture from a value-added service perspective of looking for that skilled workers or skilled trade in order to come in? Because I guess where I'm going with this is that creativity of bringing in a new business with them as well. When we do look at our raw agriculture products, when we make those into value-added services and increase our supply chain here in the province, everybody benefits from that. So have you reviewed that Senate committee report at all and looked at how IIDI could possibly participate in fulfilling some of that value-added services or the supply chain process?
Not directly involved with that report. Having said that, we do work closely with the Department of Agriculture and the agriculture community in assisting them with the processing of TFWs. Your comment isn't missed that it can be very challenging for the agriculture community to bring through temporary foreign workers, and it's not a quick, easy process. So we also work closely with the federal government of Canada, because it is a federal program, to try and identify best practices or try and remove some red tape reduction to make it more streamlined. I know that the Department of Agriculture has hired an individual that is primarily focused in on TFWs. With the recent economic conditions with COVID, I know we work closely with agriculture, bringing in and helping them organize the chartered flights and ensure the workers had the appropriate information for isolation. I would say that was predominantly the work that we've been working on over the last 6 months, more related to the COVID response and ensure that the farms, had the skilled workforce they needed to get the crop in, and now in the process of getting the crop out.
Yeah.
I would envision we'll hopefully be aligning to that scope of work here this fall.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go to Hannah, and we're starting our another round. That's it.
Okay, so I have a couple of sets of follow-ups. Regarding the business impact stream, the last time that we heard in the House, which would have been under the previous administration, any long-term retention numbers from the business impact stream, the number was 12%. So and that was over a 5-year period. So I'm a bit concerned about the kind of, the optimism in feeling that we'll see a 70% kind of success rate with that current stream, because those are all under that previous program, at which point was the long-term piece is what I'm concerned about. And part of the context for that is that the conditions for the business impact stream around residency and the business function have a close date. Once you've demonstrated that you've run that business for a period of time and have made that investment into the community, then the boxes are checked, and there is no long-term requirement for that business to continue. We have seen the direct impact of that in Charlottetown, with particularly in my jurisdiction, with significant churn, and I can't call it anything else but churn, in commercial spaces. And so not only a continual turnover because of the reflection of how that program provides that space to not need to create a long-term business, but also then the ongoing impact, what that looks like for the businesses that are trying to make a longer term, whether they're immigrant or island, or immigrants who want to be island. It makes it a hell of a lot harder when your commercial business rates are going up to $4,000 a month, which is where they're sitting right now in most commercial spaces in and around Queen Street. There are long-term effects of that program, even though it is done. And while you have 600 and something remaining clients in there, I really am concerned about how you can change that trajectory that has already had really detrimental impact to the commercial space in Charlottetown. And I think there is some responsibility for that. Not just in terms of is the money going in and out, but the responsibility for this corporation in terms of understanding that this impact is more than that transactional nature.
You made a couple points there, so please forgive me if I miss anything.
I sat here, I had to wait.
Yes.
Got more notes.
So the 12% number that you referenced initially, you're correct. That is the number that came from the federal government of Canada based on their 5-year tax filer information from, I believe, the 2016 year. So that's individuals that would have landed in 2011, most likely processed in 2009 or 8. So it's really the old investor program from 2008, some of that numbers. So when we are talking about some of the surveys results that IRCC has provided us on the pilot and some of our other programs, that's based on the programs that have been administered in the last 12 to 24 months. And it was to my comment earlier, we are comparing some apples and oranges, and I know it's frustrating because you want to make them both apples, but I can't get that IRCC tax filer data for 2019. Like if I could get IRCC to say what's the tax filer data in the 2019 tax returns, that would be getting closer to the survey that they've shared there. The refund rate is, you're right, member, that is showing what they fulfilled their obligations. It is possible some individuals that received a refund may leave the province for other reasons. So just because there's a refund doesn't necessarily mean that I have a 5-year retention of that individual. With regards to the business's long-term viability, that is something we're trying to address, as Jeff has alluded to through the different programs we're administering, but also transitioning to the work permit, I think will lead to better results, because we won't nominate them to the federal government of Canada until they run it for a year, and then they have to maintain that operations during the federal processing. So that leaves a longer runway for succession. And then back to the 676 applications that we're still processing. You're right, member. We do need to be very active in trying to work with our clients. Not every business is going to be successful, unfortunately. I've heard some terrible stats on entrepreneurs and how long they may or may not last. But we, as an office, but as well as the business community, PEI, we need to put our best foot forward in trying to welcome them into the community. I think the Chamber of Commerce have done a terrific job, especially with the Connectors programs, to integrating them into the community. PEI, we can kind of joke, but we're all about connections here. It's not like Toronto where there's millions of people walking by. It's all a lot of connections, and that's where I think we need to work with them to try and help them build their network and get them integrated into the community.
Hannah?
Thank you, yeah, and obviously prior to this, my current role, I had a very active role working directly with Connectors as one of the service providers to assist in helping newcomers, especially those in the entrepreneur stream, navigate what was a very different space for most of them. And you know, I can think of a number of fantastic success stories, but that doesn't negate the lived reality of what's happening on our high street. And everybody suffers from that, whether it's the Chambers of Commerce, whether it's long-term existing businesses or new businesses coming in, because it's an additional challenge that is an unintended consequence of the churn, that volume. And I absolutely agree that I think the changes in the program are positive long-term, but this is an added layer that we're experiencing and have been experiencing now. And again, it comes back to my point about that strategic intent. I understand that the objectives are very much around financial and economic management, but we cannot ignore the impacts on our social fabrics. And when you talk about the importance of our newcomers and how we engage and connect and develop them into our community, we can't do that if we're making everybody really angry on the other side who are in the business space, right? Those two things are mutually exclusive. If I can follow on, Chair, with a further question regarding the housing piece, unfortunately I'm going to be a bit cranky about this one too, because we cannot expect a market to self-regulate when I think that affordable housing is 80% of the market rate. This is a fight that I have continually with social development and housing, but developers are not building affordable housing, they're building housing at the market rate. In my district, the market rate for a basic 2-bedroom apartment is $1,600 a month. 80% of that is about $15 something a month. Somebody working minimum wage full-time earns about $2,500 a month if they're lucky, before tax. you cannot afford an apartment. And that's pretty much across the board. If you're on social assistance, you're getting $1,000 a month. So your rent is more than you're actually got to live on. If you're a senior, you're going to spend all the money you have. And we have over 1,000 people in PEI. We don't know the exact number. Maybe social development can tell you. They won't tell me. But we have at least 1,000 people in the province who are on a waiting list for affordable housing. The key to affordable housing is it is rent that is geared to your income. If you are on a fixed income, you cannot pay more than you earn because you can't earn anymore. It's really basic, and I know you get these numbers, but there is a really big gap between market rate and what people can actually afford. And we're not doing anything substantive to address that. I appreciate the 283 units. Most of those are not affordable rent geared to income. So the opportunity that we have with some of the unrestricted funds that may come through, some of the opportunities you've identified today, are to actively invest in developments that make a commitment to rent geared to income housing. And as my colleague from Charlottetown Brighton said, that looks like housing cooperatives. It looks like housing that is managed by the PEI Housing Corporation. And it looks like commitment not to the market rate, which will always be driven by the developer, but to an investment in long-term returns that are about the social impact of providing housing for people who otherwise cannot afford it. So that's a rant, sorry, that was not really a question, but I guess the question is, would you consider in that portfolio space that you have broadening or looking at that definition? Because honestly, there is a crisis and it's not going to go away, and allowing the developer to drive it, we absolutely need those houses too. But we have a broadening space, a big gap coming that's been here now for 4 years, and we're not addressing it.
Oh, absolutely. I'll take that feedback back to my Crown Corporation and see what we can come up with.
Chair, follow-up. CMHD's definition of affordable housing is 30% of income prior tax prior or 25% post. It is not 80% of market. Okay, it's based on what you earn and what you have as expendable funds, not on what the market tells us. If CMHC are okay with funding that, we should be okay with funding those too. And we have to change that definition. There is a real opportunity, again, the chair of the board, Mr. Flynn, there's a real opportunity for you in your role as chair to think about that strategic direction for the organization that you chair and the role that the board has in speaking about the need to think about social impact. The social impact of...
I appreciate your comments, ma'am, but I guess we only see what comes before us, so I guess when we have
Hannah? Before you, but I'm asking you to think about the direction that you set as the chair of the board, that direction could be expanded to include the social impact from commercial investment.
Bring it up at the next board meeting, certainly.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Hannah. Okay,
Passion.
thank you. Gord?
Yeah, thanks. Just getting back for a second to the Atlantic pilot and how I know it's going to be on until 2021. Are you participating in a fee, because it is a pilot, so there's obviously room to engage in feedback. When does that take place? When would PEI submit our
We are currently, actually, as we speak, undergoing negotiations with the federal government to make this a permanent program. So IRCC has done an evaluation on the program. It is a federal program, so it is their program. However, the Atlantic provinces are fully engaged in that. So as I said earlier, we meet 2 to 3 times a week right now because it is crunch time as far as, trying to come up with what the permanent program would look like so it can go through the various levels of approvals at both the provincial and federal level. But certainly all 4 Atlantic provinces' voices are being heard with regards to making this a permanent program.
Gord?
I also believe the federal government has done consultations with different settlement providers as well as different stakeholders. So it is a federal program, so they have taken the leadership role of doing that consultation with the Association for Newcomers and the different associations across the Atlantic region.
Gord?
That's great because I love the program, but it just doesn't seem to fit for Prince Edward Island, being a seasonal economy, having to get full-time work, and would love to see like an employee that comes into that, potentially having a pool of two or three different companies that they could be a part of. So, I mean, our EI system is based on hours, and this program is based on a relationship with a specific employer, so.
The exact discussion that we've been having with federal counterparts is that wouldn't it be advantageous for an employee that's working at an agriculture field for 4 or 5 months but transitions to another occupation for 2 or 3 but then back to the field? We've been pushing for that position for the last number of years, and the Atlantic region as a whole has been asking for that. But unfortunately, right now, the federal position has been they want 12 months year-round employment with one employer, but we continue to have that discussion.
Gord?
Well, I would just, that's, it's great to hear that, and we hopefully that you're at the table screaming loudly about that, because it's a great program and we want it to work, and those are just some of the things that I've seen, so I'd really, great to hear, so I'll pass.
Great, thank you, Gord. Sid?
Thank you, Chair. Johnny, being the chair of the board and having the private members of the IIDI board, I know that was a change. Actually, Steve Myers had brought in a private members bill back in 2018 to bring private members onto that board versus just deputies. Do you speak to your experience from yourself and the other private members on that board, and is it worthwhile? And to Hannah's point, are you able to push for things as a member of this board, as private members, because that was certainly something that the opposition had wanted, that voice at that time? Do you feel that you and the other private members of the board are able to do that?
I think so, Sydney. We've been 2 years, I guess, since inception. There's been a lot of stuff come before us, certainly, but personally, I can't speak to the other members, but being a part of it, it's a little humbling and well, I guess humbling. We've been trying to develop an economy on PEI here all my lifetime. When I grew up, the common notion was that you have to go away to do good, but a lot of us managed to stay here and eke out a living. And I see, I guess, my small part of the whole thing. It's certainly rewarding that you can see kind of, I guess, to use a term, behind the scenes working of PEI, and to be a little part of it, I guess. It's certainly been, I guess, an eye-opener to see the economy growing from the time I was a kid. Certainly the way it's diversified, and it seems like we finally have created an economy here, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something I think everybody that participated over the past 3 or 4 decades can be proud of, certainly.
Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. And I mean, that's, your story is exactly what what Mr. Myers had pushed for, but what opposition had pushed for back then as well. And to Hannah's point, push for that. You've got a number of great people on the board with you that to work with, and no doubt it is humbling to get in there and see that expertise too. But also push them. That's why we fought for those private members to be on that board and push for that strategic direction and to hear your type of stories and what was going to make the next Johnny Flynn successful when we're doing these things too. So I would encourage you and the other members who are probably watching or will review this transcript to do that. Keep pushing and not just with the status quo. And we appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe everybody is pretty sincere in their efforts about what we want to do, and I think it's to help the island economy and to make it a better place to live and to rear a family and the whole philosophy of island life, I guess. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Sid. Heath?
Just a clarification on what Hannah was saying. I know when we were there was buildings built in Tignish, Larry, Alberton, Summerside, Cornwall, Stratford, Montague, and Surrey, but some of those, clarify me wrong, but some of those are social housing.
Someone could be, absolutely.
Because I know Cornwall social housing, and either it's a rent subsidy or it's actually social housing on a reduced rate. So I just wanted to make sure that.
And some of those projects, remember, we didn't finance, but they were definitely very good projects in the community. what our slide was briefly talking about is what IIDI was directly involved in, not the larger projects that I think you referenced as well.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, if that's the case, then that's already in place, just to exploit it even further is what Hannah's referenced. I think.
Okay, anything else?
good.
You're
No,
good? Ola?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add a little bit to my next door MLA's statement on the housing. I have a lot of past experience with creating co-op housing when that program was out. At that point, the actual bank rate, lending rate was around in the range of 18%, which the government, CMHC, actually subsidized down to a more reasonable 2%. And the other feature of the project was there was 100% financing and there was upfront money to do the development work, preliminary design, hiring consultants and stuff like that. The government, I just want to point out that you need to think for that kind of house, you need to think of 100% financing. And I know currently your organization lends out at 4%, but in fact the government can borrow long-term at 2%. So there would be a good place to go out and, sell a few bonds and invest in social housing. It can be done without straining the provincial budget. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Did you have a question, Ola, or just a comment?
No, just more
Okay.
like a statement. Yeah.
All right, and have I reached out to all the members and all questions have been asked? Perfect. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you very much for coming in. I know it was a little warm in here. It's not usually this warm, but I appreciate you delivering an extensive presentation to us and answering all of our questions fully. And we will take a very quick recess and resume with our agenda. Thank you. We will resume. So next on our agenda, we have follow-up on audit recommendations. So we have 3 follow-ups that we need to look at. The first is the capital asset plan for provincial parks. Second is access PEI, and then management of contaminated sites. Oh, I started it without Emily here. I didn't realize that. I'm going to recess just until the clerk's here so that we can, sorry, I missed that. 1 second. Sorry. All right, and so we're just going to resume. So we are discussing the follow-up on audit recommendations. So we have the capital asset plan for provincial parks of 2019. So when the committee received the letter, it was decided it would follow up with Tourism PEI in the fall of 2020 to see if the action plan had been fully implemented by that point, as indicated. And so does the committee now wish to send a letter in that regard, or would we rather take a different action? Corey?
I'd say a letter's fine.
A letter out to the department, is everybody in favor of that? Okay. So for our next follow-up, this one is Access PEI. So Access PEI, this was 2015 audit, and at that point in time, they were 25% implemented on their recommendations. And they were taking away, if I test my memory correctly, they were taking away to work on the Department of Transportation plan of how they would deliver services on behalf. So the question is the committee hasn't received a reply in response to the work of Access PEI. And so the question out to the committee is, how would we like to proceed? And the one thing I do want to raise with this one, at the time, they were only 25% implemented. And this is an organization for government that does 350,000 transactions for and pretty much they deal with a lot of dollars. And I guess my concern around this was our security breach that we had in February, and there was a lot of legacy software around the recommendations and issues with implementing because of that. So I'd just like to raise my concern about this one in particular. And the Auditor General will not be following up on this one again, so it will be up to this committee in order to continue the follow-ups because they've already done their second year follow-up. So I'll put that out to the committee, and how would we like to proceed with this?
Sure. So
Corey?
did we send them, we sent them a letter back in the winter?
So they presented to us, and at that point in time,
Yes,
they had a deliverable for us that at the end of the year they would have the negotiation done on that agreement, on that contract, and we haven't heard anything back from them. So this would be a follow-up to that meeting.
Sorry, when you say we haven't heard anything back, they were supposed to get back to the committee on.
That's right. The action that they were taking away was to enter into negotiations with the Department of Highways or Department of Motor Vehicle to update their agreement with them that was, oh gosh, it was years and years old. I feel like it was early 2000s, mid 2000s since that had been updated. And that was the first recommendation from the Auditor General. I don't have it in front of me right now, but the first recommendation for the Auditor General was to negotiate with the different departments that they provide services for, so that there was an agreed upon service delivery method. And they didn't have those in place at the time. The one that they did have in place at the time was the one with the Department of Motor Vehicles, which was obsolete and old. So we haven't heard back since that initial meeting. September 2019, I believe, was when we had them come into the committee to present to us. So we're about a year past their presentation, and we haven't had any communication on it since then.
Have we asked them for an update? Has
No.
anyone reached out to them?
That's what we're doing. That's what this is what the committee's to decide right now is. Today is how do we want to reach out to them?
Do we want to send a letter and ask for an update? Is that fine?
I'll ask for discussion on that. Sid?
Yeah, let's send a letter and say, we have sent you a letter November 1st asking for this. We would like a response, or would you like to come in and present to us?
Okay.
And then, if we don't get a written response very quickly, then we call them to come in. But in our initial letter, in our initial follow-up to the November 1st letter, We just outlined that we sent this letter, we haven't got the information back. Can you provide us with a written response? Or if you prefer, we can invite you in to present on your written response.
Okay.
And then this fall, if we don't have a follow-up, then we'll simply call them in.
Okay, Gord?
I would say bring them in. I mean, when they did present, there was a lot of gaps, if I do recall. I mean, a lot of them were software-based, and you'd mentioned that might be an issue, but I would say bring them in. I would like an update. There was a lot of things there that they needed to work on, and I would like to see in person where they are and if they're working on them.
Okay, do you have thoughts on that? So either a letter or just call them in. How would, Carla?
Just a clarification, when they left, they had that action to take back and they never kind of got back to us on that.
Yeah, the letter is here, so it is dated November 1st, and as discussed in the meeting, the committee requests additional information on implementation of the recommendations specifically, and we listed out 5 specific actions, one of which was to develop the service level agreements with the Department of Highway Safety, which was the first recommendation, and then an update by April 2020 on work on the completion of the other templates. And then we wanted to hear back on the consultation they had with ITSS on the proposed steps towards the fulfillment, and that was the legacy software.
And we did say if you could provide this information to the committee as it becomes available. So looking at those dates and timelines, I would expect that they would definitely have those more information.
Okay, so
I
Corey?
think Sydney's idea of sending the letter and, but giving them the opportunity to come in and present if they would like to is probably a good start.
Okay.
I'm assuming we're meeting again we're going to meet again a couple times before the legislature sits.
Yeah. Okay, so can I recommend that we,
If we
did
decide
that-
to change our mind to want to call them in, we can. But
Right.
why don't we start with, I think,
okay,
that sounds like a reasonable.
so would the committee be agreeable to putting a timeline on their response back to us? And if they don't respond, then we would request that they come in and have the clerk schedule a time for them to come in. And would 2 weeks be just for a letter of update? Would the committee be agreeable for 2 weeks, a 2-week turnaround? Okay?
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so decision would be a letter to provide us an update with the request that it comes within 2 weeks. And if we don't receive that update, then please work through a time to invite them to come here to present to us. All right. The next one, for follow-up, again, this is 2015 Auditor General Recommendations on the Management of Contaminated Sites. The letter is there. At that point in time, they had an implementation rate of 11%. And so this is dated on September 26, 2019. So again, we need to make a decision on how we want to proceed with this. The committee has not received a reply to our request, in which we had asked for in September of last year. So what actions would we like to take here? Would it be a similar action?
I think we should do the same.
Okay. Everybody in favor? Yes. So we'll do the same action there. Thanks, Emily. All right, and the next is review of correspondence. So our correspondence to review is on the update for our training in the public accounts. And so we did receive communication back from the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation, and they have proposed that we do training on November 10th. given that the provincial public accounts are not going to be published until as late as January 31st. So we had at first decided that we would train on the current public accounts, but that has been delayed. So if we are agreeable that we would like to have the training on November 10th, there is a decision to be made if we want a former member of a public accounts committee that has worked with CAAF in the past to attend, and they've given some suggestions there. So they're unsure of the availability, but I think if we provide them with our direction of yes, we would like a former member of a public accounts committee to attend, then they could negotiate and arrange for that for us. So discussion on that point? Are we in favor of going ahead with training on November 10th? Yes? Okay. So we'll train on November 10th. And the other decision is the option for a former elected member to participate in that training. Would the committee like to see somebody also come in with them? Okay. All right, so we have an agreement on both of those points. Was there anything else? Oh, sorry, Sid, go ahead.
Can you just clarify who's coming in?
So coming in for us is the CEO, Carol Bellringer, and the director, which is Leslie Burns. Leslie's who attended before. And they're giving us the option of a former elected member to participate in that. So they've listed Wayne Kao from Alberta, David Christofferson or Kevin Sorensen, they would be federal. Sean Murphy, he was on the federal committee, as well as Elizabeth Weir. So they don't know their availability for November 10th, but if we don't have any concerns with any of those names, if we proceed, is that okay? All right, so yes. Okay, so that brings us to so that is all the correspondence. I just want to bring your attention to, there was a letter from Minister Compton about the public accounts. So, which will be delayed, I think, till January. Was it a specific date? It's in the email. Yes, public tabling it by January 31st. Okay, so that's just an awareness for us. So under review of scheduling, so we do have some letters out. I'll let you, Emily, summarize what's coming up next.
Sure. So I'm filling in for Ryan today, and he's let me know that he does have confirmation for the following dates. Notices haven't been sent out yet, but they will be shortly. For Tuesday, October 20th, to hear from Karen McDonald and Claire Henderson from Justice and Public Safety, and they're discussing the implementation of the 2017 Office of the Public Trustee recommendations and a further update on implementation of the 2016 Maintenance Enforcement Program recommendations. And then on October 27th, it's confirmed that David Keedwell and Sonia Cobb of Social Development and Housing can meet with the committee to discuss the implementation of the 2017 Senior Housing Program recommendations. So those two notices should be sent out shortly. And then there was a letter from the Department of Finance talking about the fiscal and economic update. So that hasn't been scheduled yet, but that was a correspondence that the committee had received, I think, a few weeks ago. And then, so we'll try to schedule that, one of the meeting times for the committee. And then there's also November 10th, which is the training. So those are kind of the dates that are on the calendar currently for this committee. Like I said, nothing has been sent out notice-wise, but it will be soon. So those are kind of the few items that Ryan has updated me on, and that I can provide an update to the committee.
And I just add, the Department of Finance one would be dependent on the fiscal update being issued. So once that financial update is made public, then we would reach out because and have the Department of Finance come in as we had agreed. Any discussion on scheduling? No? Okay. Is there any new business? I'd just like to put forward to the members, I feel like this was very informative and that this was a really good meeting for us to have with IIDI. There is a significant amount of revenue, revenue that comes from the Crown corporations that goes into our general revenue line item. And I just wanted to propose to the committee about looking at bringing in some other Crown corporations to talk to us about their strategic plans and how they're implementing it. And similar to what IIDI has done for us today. So we'll put that out for discussion. And if the committee, what the committee thinks of that idea.
I think it's a great idea. It was really valuable this morning to be able to, because beyond information being provided, there were ideas shared. And I think that's a great idea.
Okay, thanks, Carla. Any other thoughts on it? Corey?
I would agree. It was a good meeting today. But there was a lot of times where we deviated off of, the committee examines the administration of government policy, not the merits of it. Yeah. And I think it was probably mostly in everyone's questions. It was more the merits of certain policies. And
yeah.
I don't have an issue if the committee wants it. I'm just curious if is that in our mandate? Would it, could the Education and Economic Development Committee have a Crown Corp in if they want to? But, if the committee would like to, then I'm fine with it, but.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
I do. The only thing I would say about that, though, Corey, is, for instance, like the PEI Liquor Corporation falls under finance, so it doesn't really fall under any other committee. And we also, in our mandate, include fiscal management, and those Crown corporations do collect a lot of our general revenue as well, right? I believe they are 18 million. I'd have to pull it up here. But, and it's like 20-ish million in PEI Liquor Corporation. And in lieu of not having a finance committee, it is still our fiscal management. Now, we don't have control over how they operate or anything like that, but I still think that it's beneficial for us to understand how they contribute as well to our Treasury Board. So that's my only thought, as who else would call them if we didn't, but
I guess why are we calling them is it just for an information session, or are we reviewing Auditor General? Could we have them call, if the AG reviewed their Crown Corp?
Well,
could we have them in?
They all have an annual report, and we would review reports that have already been
So are we
published.
just reviewing every annual report? That's what I guess
Well, no,
I'm just
I
trying
wouldn't.
to understand the reasoning.
I wouldn't say that we would review every annual report, but when you have, if, for instance, I'll bring up the main. So IIDI contributes, I believe it's $18 million to our general revenue. PEI Liquor Commission contributes $12 million to our general revenue. $7 million for PEI Energy Corporation, which I would agree that could go through natural resources and environmental sustainability if that's something that they thought to go through. But I do think that there is value in reviewing the different revenue sources into government, especially from a Crown Corporation perspective, as we did similarly here, to understand, yes, how do they contribute, but also, is there other areas that we're not supposed to do the merits of, but is there ways that they're operating today that we should be aware of? So I'm putting it out as a suggestion of other organizations that we could call before the committee that has to do with where our revenue sources are coming from. So it is fiscal management.
I don't know, perhaps the committee.
If you don't agree, that's fine, but it's up for discussion. So go ahead, Sid.
There's a lot. Which ones are you thinking?
Well, there's I would prioritize, for instance, the Liquor Corporation and cannabis, seeing that they fall under Department of Finance, which doesn't fall under another standing committee. And I guess those would be the two that I would prioritize. Sid?
Thank you, Chair. And what would your letter of invitation state, the reason for coming?
Similar to IIDI, if you'd come in and give us an overview of your operations and the different programs that you deliver through your strategic plan. Sid?
Okay. So that's the two you're proposing?
I think so, yeah.
Or one?
Yeah. Ola?
Well, I just wanted to mention a few other corporations like the Energy Corporation, the Housing Corporations, and the CADC and SADC.
We meet every Tuesday.
Not so much that they have, but they could have a huge influence. So I think, they're all well worth looking at. I'm
Yeah.
not sure which committee is the best way to look at them, but they should be looked at. They basically operate without barely any oversight, without anybody knowing what they're doing or discussing their potential. Anyway, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Ola. I didn't put those forward because they would reside in other
But
committees.
I know they do, yeah.
So, but the two that I presented would reside under finance which is why. Gord, do you have any thoughts?
I think it would be, I wouldn't have a problem. I'm interested to hear from both those organizations. I mean, it's like, it'd be nice to hear what they're doing for revenues, how COVID's affected those organizations, and, to figure that out. So I'd be in support of that.
Okay, thank you. And it is the same board, so it can be done in one day, right? The two organizations. So what's the consensus, decision? I feel it's a little bit split, so how do we want to proceed?
I'm fine.
Are you good?
If
Okay.
you want to have them in.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, go ahead, Sid.
Maybe I will propose that we do it after we have our education session
Sure.
on the public accounts, because these Crown Corps are part of the public accounts of PEI, so it might give us some give us a better context for asking questions rather than just the strategic direction of the
Perfect.
the PEI Commission. It gives a chance to understand their balance sheets a bit better and get into the detail of it.
Thank you, Sid. That's an excellent suggestion, so, yeah. Okay,
Just confirm.
sure, go ahead, Emily.
So that the invitation would be going to the PEI Liquor Corporation and the PEI Cannabis Corporation, which, did you mention they're both the same?
They would operate they have the same board, and I believe that they
Okay.
have the same, I believe so, right? Yeah.
But that will be the
But
two
you can-
corporations.
Yeah.
And that the committee's requesting an overview of the operations and the programs that would fall under their strategic planning. And that the committee is okay that particular presentation would take place after the training that's going to be on November 10th.
And I would be fine if the invitation went out after November 10th, so if there was other things that we wanted to include in the invitation after we've gone through that session.
Great, so I'll make a note and that the committee can consider that again after their training.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great, thanks, Emily. Okay, any other new business? And with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Corey. Thank you.